What parades as devotion is often conquest wearing perfume. Man speaks of love, but love is rarely innocent. It does not fall from heaven like rain. It rises steaming from the pits of longing, hunger, and ancient instincts. When two souls entangle in what is called toxic love, they are not embracing, they are wrestling, even when naked, especially when naked. The sighs of passion mask a deeper cry, I want you, so that I may not be without power. There is no equality in this theater. One plays the tyrant, the other the victim, but their roles switch with a grim rhythm. Today, she weeps and he consoles. Tomorrow, he begs and she withholds. They keep score, always. No one truly forgives. Every kiss contains an echo of previous wounds. They seek each other, not for the growth of the soul, but for confirmation of their own shattered importance. The will to power is not always loud. Sometimes it enters the room in a whisper. I need you. The desperate lover is not weak, he is clever. To kneel is to manipulate. To suffer loudly is to control silently. How seductive is the role of the savior? How flattering to believe oneself, the only one who can rescue the beloved from herself. And thus, the strong are ensnared by their own desire to be needed. This is how the trap closes. One wants to be adored, the other wants to be saved. But these are masks, not truths. No one truly wants the salvation of the other. They want them to stay dependent. A toxic lover does not want a healed partner. They want one who limps only in their direction. You complete me is not a statement of affection. It is a threat. It says, if you outgrow me, I am nothing. This is not love. It is vampirism. Each feeds on the weakness of the other. They nourish themselves with jealousy, insecurity, and dread. The arguments, the reconciliations, the violent tenderness, all of it is a cycle of feeding. The toxic relationship is a two-headed beast devouring itself and blaming hunger on the world. And yet, they stay. They call it passion. They call it fate. They write poems about it. They drink wine to it. They hold hands while walking through the ruins of their peace. But what they truly worship is not each other. It is the war between them. They need the conflict because it distracts them from the emptiness within. In the noise of chaos, they cannot hear the silence of their own hollowness. Why do they remain? Because domination feels like intimacy to the spiritually impoverished. The one who cannot command themselves must command another. The one who cannot live alone must possess someone else to feel alive. In this way, the toxic relationship is a failed empire, always expanding, always crumbling, never fulfilled. Its currency is control, and its language is contradiction. I hurt you because I love you. I stay because I can't leave. I yell because I care. There are no saints in this dance, only actors, each trying to rewrite the other's script. The man who seeks to fix her trauma ends up becoming its author. The woman who wants to change him discovers he was never a blank canvas, but a mirror. They stare into each other's eyes and see only distortions of themselves, not because love blinds, but because it distorts through desire. Power. It is always about power, not the grand, tyrannical kind that moves armies, but the subtle dominion over a heart, a mind, a mood, the ability to ruin someone's day with a look, the triumph of being the reason they can't sleep, the poisoned sweetness of knowing they would fall apart if you left. This is the will to power at its most intimate, not the power to rule the world, but to rule one person completely. They name it love because to call it what it is, manipulation, fear, control, obsession, would demand an escape, and they do not want escape. They want captivity dressed in silk. They want to be chained with golden links. They want to be the only one their lover hates to need. For in this perverse logic, pain becomes proof of devotion. If it hurts, it must be real. If it bleeds, it must matter. But love, true love, does not consume. It does not demand the destruction of self for the union of two. What is called toxic love is merely the will to power dressed in the garments of romance. It does not elevate the soul. It shackles it. It does not unite. It conquers. The language of flowers and apologies cannot hide the stench of conquest. One must ask, not who holds whom, but who owns whom. A toxic relationship is not a drama between two lions. It is a ritual among sheep. Beneath the shouting, the clinging, the endless proclamations of devotion, There is no grandeur, no nobility of spirit, no Dionysian fire. There is only fear, and where there is fear, the herd instinct flourishes. One does not cling to a lover out of strength, but from the dread of being alone in the wilderness of existence. In a toxic bond, two souls do not dance, they huddle. They do not challenge each other. They conform, contort, dissolve into one another, hoping to escape the agony of individuality. The herd is always terrified of solitude. Solitude demands thought, and thought demands courage. But the toxic pair, entangled in their rituals of mutual dependence, seek not courage but refuge. They find in one another a mirror that reflects only the familiar, a reinforcement of weakness, not a challenge to become. In this bond, neither lover wants to be seen in truth. They wish only to be validated in illusion. One says, "You complete me." But what they mean is, "You confirm I do not need to change." The herd mind whispers it is better to suffer together than to question alone. This is why they stay. This is why, after every wound, every betrayal, every humiliation, they return to the same poisoned embrace. The herd does not ask if the pasture is healthy, only if it is full. The toxic relationship becomes that pasture. They graze on each other's misery. They ruminate on the past. They recycle apologies and confessions like cud in 1,000 stomachs of regret. The individual dissolves. What remains is a shared sickness, more comfortable than solitude, more acceptable than the horror of freedom. Even their suffering is imitative. They borrow gestures from others, from stories, from films. The jealous outburst, the dramatic exit, the tearful reconciliation, none of it is born of inner truth. It is theater, performed not for transformation, but for validation. The toxic lovers act as though they are the tragic heroes of a love too intense for the world to understand. But it is not intensity that binds them. It is weakness disguised as passion, conformity masked as chemistry. One must see how sameness infects their bond. They begin to speak alike, think alike, even suffer alike. Individuality is not celebrated, it is punished. When one begins to grow, to break free, the other resists, not out of cruelty, but out of terror. Growth is exile in the herd. To become stronger is to threaten the equilibrium of dependency. A toxic relationship survives by keeping both partners small, insecure, manageable. There is no room for assent, only repetition. This is the secret cowardice of the herd mind. It prefers known hells to unknown heavens. The toxic pair often speak of dreams, of change, of escape. But their actions betray them. The cycle is always stronger than the resolution. Promises are made not to be kept, but to preserve hope long enough for the next relapse. They do not believe in change. They believe in waiting. Waiting for the other to change. Waiting for time to heal what character refuses to confront. Even their love is collectivist. It is not about the individual soul. It is about belonging, possession, and recognition. They fear being unseen more than being abused. So they tolerate betrayal, neglect, even contempt, as long as they are acknowledged. The worst fate is not cruelty, it is invisibility. And so they provoke, sabotage, cling, betray, all in the service of being seen. Better to be hated than ignored. Better to be wounded than forgotten. This is the cry of the herd, bound heart. In the toxic relationship, personal boundaries are not crossed. They are obliterated. There is no you and I, only an us that devours both. This fusion is not intimacy. It is suffocation. The herd mind exalts this state as romantic unity, but it is merely the erasure of two incomplete selves trying to vanish into each other. Not union, but mutual disappearance. Not connection, but confusion. What they call love is the terror of individuation. What they call loyalty is mutual sabotage. They remain together not because they grow together, but because they fear growing apart. The herd mind does not dream of greatness. It dreams of safety. And toxic love offers that safety, wrapped in chains, bound in routines, crowned with empty declarations. One does not need to be strong, only available. One does not need to think, only obey the cycle. It is a comfort that asks for your soul and returns only echoes. There is a strange fuel that burns between toxic lovers. Not passion, not trust, not even desire, but resentment. It is the slow fire that smolders under every tender gesture. The acid that corrodes every word of forgiveness, the poison beneath every "I'm fine." They do not grow closer through love, but remain bound by grievances never truly resolved. Each offense forgiven is only buried, not absolved. Each apology accepted is placed into a quiet ledger, kept not out of mercy, but for future leverage. What appears to be closeness is merely proximity to the wound, and both partners make their home in it. Resentment is not always loud. Often it smiles, it kisses, it even whispers sweet things in the night, but beneath it lies the silent inventory of past betrayals, slights, dismissals, and unmet needs. In the toxic relationship, no sin is ever forgotten, only deferred. This is not the grace of deep love. It is the strategy of spiritual accountants, each keeping careful records to balance their sense of injustice. They do not love, they trade debts. The weaker partner often exerts the greater power, not through strength, but through suffering. Victimhood becomes a form of dominance. To be hurt is to hold the moral high ground, to cry is to accuse. In this theater of pain, the one who bleeds louder wins. The toxic lover uses their wounds as weapons, fashioning guilt into shackles. "Look at what you've done to me," becomes a creed. Their suffering justifies control, and their neediness becomes a justification for endless demands. But the stronger is not innocent. They remain not out of love, but out of guilt, out of fear, out of obligation falsely called compassion. They believe they are noble, carrying the other like a burden they alone are brave enough to bear. But this is vanity masked as altruism. In truth, they enjoy the role. They enjoy being the one who is needed, the one who is indispensable. They mistake codependency for meaning. They fear being seen as cruel, so they stay, and become cruel in quieter ways. The resentment flows both ways. The one who suffers resents their dependence. The one who supports resents the weight. But neither speaks of it honestly. They perform the rituals of love to avoid the confrontation of truth. The dinners, the texts, the apologies, the plans, they are not expressions of joy, but distractions from the decay. In this bond, honesty is too dangerous. It would unravel everything. So they lie, not to deceive the other, but to protect the illusion they both need. Envy plays a silent role. They see in the other what they lack and hate them for it. One resents the other's confidence. The other resents the neediness that demands constant tending. The toxic relationship breeds a quiet competition: who needs less, who hurts more, who will break first. Each hopes the other will be the villain, so they can claim to be the wounded saint. But both are equally culpable, and both are too proud to admit it. There is a perverse satisfaction in the suffering. It provides identity. I am the one who stays. I am the one who endures. I am the one who keeps forgiving. These become badges of honor, but they are not signs of strength. They are excuses for avoiding the harder task: leaving, healing, becoming. In resentment, there is inertia. It binds them to the past and ensures that every new moment is stained by what came before. They do not walk forward. They circle the same emotional grave, calling it commitment. Even their intimacy is poisoned. Touch becomes a transaction. Affection is conditional. The bed is not a sanctuary, but a battlefield of withheld tenderness and strategic advances. Sex becomes a language of retribution or desperate reconciliation, a way to assert control or plead for it. The body remembers what the mouth does not speak. Every embrace carries ghosts. To remain in resentment is to fear freedom. Freedom would mean confronting one's own role in the pattern, one's own cowardice, one's own addiction to suffering. It is easier to blame the other. It is easier to say, "You ruined me," than to ask, "Why did I stay?" The toxic bond survives because both partners prefer resentment over responsibility. They build their connection on complaint and mistake the echo of their mutual bitterness for proof of depth. They say love requires forgiveness, but in toxic love, forgiveness is only a delay of justice. What they give each other is not grace but parole. Temporary release, under the condition that the past never be forgotten. Each kind word is shadowed by an old accusation. Each act of kindness is accompanied by the unspoken, "Now you owe me." This is not love. It is the economy of bitterness. And in this economy, both partners are bankrupt, living off borrowed emotion, spending more pain than they can repay. It is not the cruelty of their partner that terrifies them most. It is the silence that would follow their departure. The toxic lover does not cling to the relationship because it brings them joy, but because the alternative is an abyss. Solitude is a mirror they dare not face, for in it they see not their reflection, but their vacancy. They fear being alone, not because they are full of love to give, but because they are hollow and desperate to be filled. To remain in suffering is easier than to risk the unknown. Pain is familiar, loneliness is not. The toxic lover confuses noise for meaning. They crave drama, conflict, tension. These are the only rhythms they recognize as life. When there is silence, they panic. When the phone does not ring, when no argument erupts, when the air does not crackle with some emotional explosion, they feel abandoned, irrelevant, erased. Better a cruel word than no word. Better tears than emptiness. In the absence of suffering, they lose their sense of purpose. Suffering to them becomes a lifeline. To be alone would mean to sit with the self, and this is intolerable. For the toxic lover has never truly met themselves. Their entire identity has been constructed in reaction to others, pleasing, provoking, pleasing again. They exist only in contrast, only in reflection. A partner, no matter how destructive, provides the necessary frame. Through the chaos of the relationship, they feel real. Without it, they become ghost-like. This is why they will beg for love from those who harm them, why they will return again and again to hands that have struck them. The pain tells them they are still alive. They speak of love, but what they desire is occupation. They want their thoughts colonized, their feelings dictated, their daily life intertwined so completely that even misery feels like intimacy. They do not want a partner, they want a presence. Something to distract them from the void. Someone to listen to their sorrows, to react to their moods, to confirm their existence. They do not love the other. They love the role the other plays in their avoidance of solitude. In solitude, the questions arise. Who am I without this person? What do I want that is not a reaction to them? What pain have I buried under the rituals of attachment? These are questions the toxic lover cannot answer. They are not ready to confront the childhood fears, the inherited wounds, the self-betrayals. It is easier to stay, to fight, to cry, to kiss, to repeat. The relationship becomes a distraction from self-awareness. Every hour spent in argument is an hour spared from self-reflection. Even their longing is a form of escape. They do not long for the partner's love. They long for what it allows them to forget. They fantasize about the good times, not because they were truly good, but because they were free of solitude's interrogations. The memory of being seen, even falsely, is more comforting than the truth of being unseen by oneself. This is why they chase what hurts them, not because they enjoy pain, but because they are more afraid of stillness than suffering. They will often say, "I can't live without them." And this is true, not because the person is irreplaceable, but because their absence would expose the lie. The lie that one's worth depends on another's attention. The lie that love can heal what one refuses to examine. The lie that misery shared is better than emptiness faced alone. The toxic lover builds their life around this illusion. And so they cling, not because they believe it will get better, but because they cannot imagine who they are without the struggle. Freedom terrifies them, not because it is cruel, but because it is quiet. In freedom, there is no one to blame, no one to perform for, no chaos to hide behind. There is only the self, and if the self has been neglected, ignored, sacrificed for the sake of love, then solitude becomes unbearable. So they return to the familiar pain, not because they are helpless, but because they are unprepared to rebuild. They have confused pain with presence for so long that absence feels like death. They call it heartbreak, but it is the fear of meeting themselves, alone, in the ruins. Leaving a toxic relationship is not merely an act of departure. It is a metamorphosis. It is not about walking out of a door, but about no longer needing to stand at it, waiting. The chains are not held by the other, they are forged within. One does not simply leave a toxic lover. One must first slay the parts of oneself that invited them in, that tolerated the poison, that confused captivity with intimacy. The one who leaves must first become someone who can leave. And this is a task far more violent than any breakup. The weak soul remains, Not because it loves, but because it hopes. Hope is the final illusion. The hope that they will change. The hope that things will return to how they never truly were. The hope that suffering has sanctity. But hope without will is self-deception. To hope for the transformation of the other, while refusing one's own, is cowardice in velvet robes. One must become the kind of person who no longer waits to be saved, who no longer romanticizes pain, who no longer confuses devotion with self-abandonment. To overcome oneself is to interrogate every shadow. Why did I stay? What was I avoiding? What part of me needed their cruelty to feel real? What emptiness did I appoint them to fill? These questions do not lead to comfort. They lead to fire. They burn illusions. They destroy identities. For in the toxic bond, the self is not just wounded, it is warped. The very image of who one is becomes distorted by the gaze of the other. To leave is not just to exit. It is to dismantle the mirror in which you learn to see yourself broken. People speak of healing, but healing is not enough. Healing implies a return to what was. But what was is precisely what enabled the bondage. What is required is transformation, not recovery. One must become unrecognizable to the person they were in that relationship. To truly leave is to never again be the version of yourself that needed their validation, that mistook control for care, that accepted apologies instead of change. The one who leaves does not just outgrow the other. They outgrow the need to be needed. And this is the agony, because before you can become that new self, you must endure the death of the old one. The version of you that stayed will scream. It will plead. It will remind you of the good days, the soft moments, the shared dreams. It will call the cage a home. It will tell you that the pain was not so bad. It will say, at least you were not alone. But to overcome oneself is to allow that voice to die. Not silence it, but outlive it. To stand, finally, beyond its reach. Most do not leave because they fear what comes after. They think they fear loneliness, but what they truly fear is responsibility. In toxicity, all failure can be shared, all blame divided, all emptiness explained away. Alone, there is no one else to point to. The burden of self becomes inescapable, and yet, only here, alone, unguarded, can transformation begin. One must step into this desert willingly, with no map, and let the wind strip them bare. The toxic bond often continues even after the body leaves. It echoes in the mind. The voice of the other becomes internalized, repeated, believed. To overcome oneself is to challenge that voice, to replace it with one forged from truth and fire. Not comfort, but clarity. Not kindness, but sovereignty. The mind must be rebuilt from the ashes of dependency. The heart must be taught to beat without begging for rhythm from another. There is no savior, no wise stranger, no perfect new lover who will redeem the past. That too is illusion. There is only the long road through the self. The one who leaves and does not return has walked that road, not because they found strength, but because they stopped expecting it to come from outside. They chose to become the source. They chose to build an inner citadel where no toxic wind can enter, where no unworthy memory is worshipped, where pain is no longer proof of love, and silence is no longer a threat. Only those who have overcome themselves can leave. The sickness of toxic love is not born merely in poor choices or bad timing. It is rooted in the profound refusal to become. These relationships, entangled in resentment, dependency, and cowardice, are not exceptions. They are symptoms. They reveal a deeper rot: the abandonment of the self, the sacrifice of growth for comfort, the exchange of becoming for belonging. What is called love is often nothing but fear in disguise. Fear of solitude, fear of freedom, fear of one's own depth. But there is no liberation in being needed, no glory in enduring, no virtue in staying small. To break from the toxic bond is not to flee from another, but to revolt against the self that allowed it. And this revolt must be total. It must scorch every illusion, sever every excuse, and demand from the soul the one thing it fears most: responsibility. No one escapes through blame. No one ascends through pity. The path is solitary, the pain real, and the reward immense to stand alone, unafraid, no longer begging for what must be built within. Only those who have cast off the herd mind, who have turned resentment into fire, who have chosen solitude over performance, and who have slain the needy self can love in truth. All others merely cling.